All right, I am live here for the live stream that we do on 7 o'clock at Eastern Time Zone on Sundays, where we talk about mental health stuff. And we are doing something a little different. Last couple weeks we did this, so we did this last week. Hopefully, it'll go as well as we did last week. Went really well the week before, but as always, I respond first and foremost to anything that is in the chat. So feel free to just post stuff in the chat for any questions you might have regarding mental health stuff. Hello, welcome to the chat. Good to have you here. But with that said, dealing with mental health issues and different struggles and different questions you might have, hey, good, welcome to the chat. Good to have you. It might be something that you don't want everyone to know. So there is a few options you have. One is you could say, I'm asking for a friend, and then of course no one will know that it's you. I also am not pointing out, even when I'm saying hi to the people in the chat, who they are, even if it's obvious. I mean, some people, like, it's literally their name, and so they're probably not trying to be anonymous, but I try to keep confidentiality as good as I can in a public forum. And there are some, you can basically say, my friend Steve. Steve is the character until we have a Steve in the chat that has all the mental health issues and questions. And then also you can text 772 303 3034. That's 772 303 3034. And that is my line for the private practice that I work with, at my company, whatever, how you ever say it. And you can text those that any question you want to that line. So that's where people call and text to get appointments anyway. But if you want to text it, no one will know it's you. It's perfectly private and confidential. Look at that. So I will not be like, oh yeah, Susie. Well, the code we use is Steve. Steve's got a question. So someone will be looking at that chat as we go. So there are your options for asking questions. Please do ask questions in the chat because it is very helpful. And that's kind of the point. I will talk about mental health stuff related regardless. So if there are no questions about anything mental health related, then I will still be talking and it will hopefully be good. Okay. So that's the idea of what we do here for this time period. Okay. So before we got any questions, because we don't yet have any questions in the chat, I'm going to talk a little bit about values. So acceptance and commitment therapy is a value-driven approach to therapy. And the way, it's funny because I think I said this another week that I was looking for a therapy. Hello, welcome to the chat. I was looking for a therapy approach before I even started counseling and thinking there's got to be something that's focused on just becoming unstuck. Because this feeling of stuck that I had many, many years ago in my life, I was like, this can't be only me. There are, of course, people that get stuck in addiction. And I was thinking about the overlap of all addictions, but then I was just thinking about getting just stuck in whatever, stuck in your narrative, stuck in yourself. I used to say this phrase all the time where I was like, I wish I could get away from myself. Because everywhere I go, there I am. I just felt stuck in my role of life. And I was couldn't find it. And then it wasn't until I was studying therapy that I started to see acceptance and commitment therapy called ACT. And it was all about getting unstuck. It was all about psychological flexibility. Now, in acceptance and commitment therapy, there's 6 different tools that we talk about and use, 6 primary tools. Hello, welcome to the chat. And it can be boiled down to 3 things: being open, being aware, and being engaged. And that's where we talk about the values, is being engaged in what matters. So there's a choice point in ACT that you are either moving towards or away from a value-driven life. So in ACT, we believe that if you are living, you're happy to have you here too. If you're living, and by the way, I love all the highs. I love everybody saying hello in the chat. But I also love the questions. So feel free to give questions about mental health stuff. If you live a value-driven approach to therapy or to life, not just therapy, it's going to be something that helps enrich your lives. And that's a better idea of looking at how you want to live than what makes you happy. You know, Sheryl Crow might have said, if it makes you happy, it can't be that bad. But the reality is sometimes the things that make us happy in the moment can actually pull us away from our values. Sometimes, well, I won't say who, but okay, here we got a question. I'm slightly struck and feeling overwhelmed. Advice. Yeah, I mean, well, so stuck and overwhelmed. Stuck and overwhelmed. I mean, like the overwhelmed thing sometimes can help to compartmentalize and break it down into little pieces and look at what exactly is the pride. So this goes to the values. Actually, the biggest thing that I wanted to talk about today is if you look at a value-driven approach, you can't have all your values be the same priority. You have to look at what are your primary values that are your highest priority and what are your secondary values. Because if you're being overwhelmed, then you might be trying to do everything. And you might need to go, you know what? I can't do everything. I had this one therapist that actually said to me a metaphor with you get 10 pennies in the day. If you have 10 pennies in the day, how are you going to spend those 10 pennies? Because you can't spend them all in one place and then have nothing left for the rest of the day. Now, 10's a small number. Hopefully we have more than 10 things that we can do in a given day before we're exhausted. But you got to think about where are my priorities and how am I aligning them with my values? Because if you're just responding to needs, you're going to feel overwhelmed. In most avenues in life, the options of the things that we could do that would be helpful things, that would be things that are positive, are infinite. The things you could do, and living that mindset of like, what? Oh, by the way, I got a like. Thank you guys. I appreciate whenever I get a thumbs up on the video. That helps the algorithm for us to be more and more discovered. If we look at these things and we go, oh, you know, this would be a good thing to do. This would be a good thing to do. This would be a good thing to do. Oh man, I should do this. I should do this. It's like we're falling in under the tyranny of the should, and we're going to feel overwhelmed. Now, sometimes you might go, yeah, but Richard, it's easy to say that. I've got things that I need to do, which is just a more tyrannical version of should. And if I don't, oh man, I don't know if you guys heard that, but literally when I said, if I don't, there's this lightning because it's a storming where I am a little bit. And it goes kaboom. Hi, Ripley. Oh, yeah, it's scary. I'm sorry. She's hiding under the couch now. That crack-a-boom got to her. But anyway, if you don't, crack-a-boom, right? Everything will go terrible, except for usually it doesn't. Usually it's not as bad as you think it's going to be. In fact, they did a study on worry, and they found that people got 0 to 10% of their worries correct. So in other words, the things they worried about, somewhere between 0 and 10%. The most accurate worry only is accurate 10% of the time. It's tricky trying to respond to needs and make room for your own needs. Yeah. So great insight. Yeah. So what we have to do is we have to think about what is our primary value and think about how we want to move towards that value. And that's how we make decisions in each moment, right? And that is with the caveat of our limitations, because we all have a limited amount of energy, a limited amount of time. And so we want to spend it living a life that we are engaged in what matters to us. If I was talking earlier about like, if it makes you happy, it can't be that bad. Well, sometimes we make decisions based on wanting to either avoid pain or wanting to pursue something that we feel pleasurable. Now, those aren't necessarily terrible things, but they shouldn't be the ultimate matrix for how we do it. In other words, those are secondary things, right? Avoiding pain and experiencing pleasure should be secondary. Primary should be if it's living a life that we're engaged in what matters most to us. Because if it's something that matters most to us, it's going to be worth going through the pain. There's obviously really easy examples that are self-evident with this. For instance, childbirth. If a woman wants to become a mother, and that's something that is a big deal for her, that's something that's a high value in her life, it's going to have to go through the process of experiencing discomfort and pain, not only in the labor, but the whole, being pregnant. There's a few women out there that have enjoyed being pregnant, but most of the women I've talked to don't love the process. You go through that pain so that you can experience the value that you're more deeply engaged in. There are people that are not doing the thing that they most want to do, or not moving towards the life that they most want to have, because they're trying to avoid the experiences of pain or possible risk of being hurt. And that feels right, but gets us stuck. And so that's part of the process of ACT in that value-driven approach. It's not about pleasure or pain primarily. And there's a bunch of different examples of where there are certain things that can be really good secondary values, but not really good primary values. So, for instance, when it comes to values, I was talking with a friend, and we were actually running at the time. And as we were running, it came up, I'm not exactly sure how, but this idea of transparency and, having people just be completely upfront and honest about everything. And I think that's a great secondary value. And what I mean by secondary value is it is a positive, it is a virtue. It's just not a virtue that we can pursue at any cost. And if we do, we're probably going to have more negatives than positives. And that's, of course, in my opinion. So let me just dissect something a little bit here. The value-driven approach, that's ACT. Figuring out what your primary values are, that's your individual route, right? So that's something that you need to do for you. I'm not trying to do it for everyone in the world as a therapist. Okay, I'm just using it as an example of when I think through what my values are and why. I think through secondary and primary values. Transparency is a great secondary value. It's a great fruit from having a good primary value. Why do I think transparency in particular, and this is just the one that came up in our conversation, is not a really great primary value? Well, there was this one guy who used to say, you don't get what you expect, you get what you inspect. And the idea he had was you got to make sure, so you can trust someone, that you inspect randomly what they're doing. Now, by the very nature of trust and what trust is, that's not trust. That's actually distrust. You are not trusting someone, so you feel like you have to inspect them. And people actually do respond to distrust. In other words, people will sense that you don't trust them when you're randomly checking on them just to make sure they're doing what they said they were going to do. Now, I'm not trying to say it's an extreme on the other hand, and you should just have blind trust no matter what. What I am saying is that if you take this posture of we're focusing on transparency, we're focusing on trying to make sure the person is doing what they say they're going to be doing. Long term, you're probably going to have an influence of actually the person feeling controlled, not feeling a sense that you have their back and trust them. And therefore, what a lot of people end up doing is they end up feeling responding to that distrust by rebellion. So that, oh, you're going to check on me all the time, I'll show you, right? And it's almost like a competition between the one person who is trying to inspect and the other person who's trying to not let themselves be discovered, rather than having somebody who believes in you, who is trying to build a trusting relationship. So a better primary value in my mind in this example is trust, right? Trust will include transparency as a result, but the route to trust is not through demanding or forcing transparency. Rather, as you build the trust, the person becomes more and more transparent. And so, like, here's a great example. So there are people that are not great at being honest, or not. Well, that's true too. There's definitely a lot of people that are not great at being honest. There are people that are not great at receiving honesty. There are people that the way they react, and the worst thing we can do in terms of inspiring somebody to be transparent, influencing transparency, is overreacting to what they're saying and threatening maybe the relationship or that person in general based on that thing of transparency. Now, nuance matters, right? Every situation is different. But if we're in settings where there is a breach of trust, okay, a breach of excellent behavior, a mistake, who would ever make one of those? And the person comes to us and they share with us, we might be hurt. We might feel emotionally upset. And I'm not saying that we have to deny that in the process. We just can't have it be our focal point. We have to, it can't be the whole focal point. We have to also reinforce the transparency that just happened. Because even though you might say they broke your trust, they actually, if they came forward and shared with you transparently what happened, they were moving toward that principle of trust, not away from it in that moment, right? So this is the confession effect, that when we respond to a confession, do so with grace and love and support, we reinforce that behavior. And so much of these principles come back to operant conditioning, dog training. As one of my clients jokes about, because I work with her and she's married, and we often talk about her husband and the principles of dog training and how it works. Yes, with men too. So people say men are dogs. Well, then reward every positive step they make in the right direction, and they will figure things out. You just have to be really patient, because often they don't exactly know what they're doing, right? Dogs and men. Question in the chat. Do you have examples of how to empower people other than you can do it? Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to use an example that I might regret. It's definitely a little embarrassing because it's my own little thing. Okay. And I don't think it's the worst thing in the world that every once in a while my parents have enabled me on this one. But it's probably not the healthiest thing. So I hate talking to customer service people, and especially like on the phone. It gives me so much anxiety. It stresses me out. It drains me so much. Every once in a while, my parents will we'll just do it for you, and they'll call, right? That would be more enabling. Empowering is them saying to me, hey, I know this is really stressful for you, but I know that you're capable of doing it. What can we do to help you feel more confident? And it might be in the first step being like, look, we'll be on the line with you, right? And and the one of the principles in therapy also is similar to the principle when it comes to working out. If you haven't worked out in the longest time, and you all of a sudden go in under the bench press and you try to bench some heavy weight, you're probably going to injure yourself. Hopefully, you have a good spotter to make sure that you don't just throw. I can't tell you how many times guys that have never benched before, especially, think, oh, you're going to load up the bar. I can certainly bench this body weight, and they're, or heavyweight, and they're shocked and surprised when they can't bench as much as they think they could. You might just start with doing some push-ups, right? You might have to start doing push-ups on your knees, right? Don't beat yourself up about having it be a slow progression, but make sure there's a progression. So it might be that they're like, okay, well, we'll do the call for you, but we're going to do it while you're on the phone with us, right? And you're on the other line, and you can be muted, but you have to be listening to the call. And then it would be like, okay, we'll do that a couple times. And now it's going to be where you're going to do the talking, but we'll be on the phone. And if you need anything, we'll chime in, right? Until you feel more comfortable, and then slowly ease into handling those situations, right? That's an example of empowering somebody. So empowering is a challenge. Maybe change the you into we. Yeah, so we can do this together, right? But I know you can, I'd still use you some of the times. We can do this together. You are capable. And I know that you're capable on your own, but I'm here for you to support you. And so we can do this at first to help you feel more confident in whatever the situation is, whatever the thing is, right? So feel free to give me more if you want of direction of what you're looking for with the idea of empowering people. But with whatever the person is struggling with, you want to give them the tools and the resources, but have them do the work, right? Sometimes you have to baby step and give them first the opportunity to do it all on their own, then maybe step in a little bit more until you get the thing done, and then slowly, hopefully, help directly less and less. And I mean, this is honestly a big principle that I try to do with most things in life. I'm not trying to say that we should never directly help people, but I think we should be slow to directly help people. I think that what we first should look to do is to see if we can just encourage them, inspire them, empower them. And if that cheerleading isn't enough, then we go, okay, what tools and resources can I help give you so that you are capable of doing it? And then what practice can we do so that you are capable of doing it, right? So for instance, maybe somebody's in a toxic relationship and they should break up with the person, but they're like, I couldn't do that, right? It's like, okay, well, we could practice. We could literally role play. I will play that person and we will break up, and we'll just do that over and over until you feel comfortable in actually having that conversation. And they've done research on this, that as people rehearse, they feel more and more confident until eventually they've envisioned themselves doing it enough times that they go, you know what? I really think that I can do this. Funny, I've actually done the exact scenario with one of my boys, the customer service call. Yeah. See, it's like adulting, it's hard. And everybody has different things that, are easy for them and different things that are challenging. I'm not saying you can't adapt to those things, but that is an example of empowering. And what I mean by that is you can have where you're doing what you're capable of doing well, and you're having somebody else who's doing something they're capable of doing, and kind of having like an exchange there. So in other words, you don't have to do all the construction work at your house. I got another thumbs up. Thank you for that. You can hire somebody to do it, right? And you might have a friend that comes over and helps you with things, right? That's okay too. But hopefully that is reciprocal, right? Which this is kind of a caveat, but I've had a couple of times in conversations recently where the concept of reciprocal versus transactional have come up. It's not exactly primary, secondary values. It's just I think a little helpful, and we're just spitballing with the mental health conversation here. And these chats do go all over the place, and that's kind of the part of the idea of them. But it can sometimes be unclear to somebody who's been in a toxic environment and has insecure attachment, the difference between transactional and reciprocal. When we are not feeling safe, we fall into the mentality of transactional relationships where it's like, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. But healthy relationships are not transactional, they are reciprocal. So it shouldn't be all going in one direction. One person should not be pouring out to the other person and never getting back. Those are not healthy relationships. But at the same time, transactional is where you're constantly measuring to make sure that it's even, and that just doesn't work. For one, as human beings, we are not good at knowing when something is reciprocal. So we often feel, if we're thinking about things being transactional, that we are doing more than the other person is doing. So taking that mentality ends up being toxic. Okay. Really challenging, doing it scared, but definitely makes it a little easier each time. For instance, I'm not sure exactly. I know it was before I was talking about transactional and reciprocal. But that is how it should feel when we're trying to be empowered to do something that we're not great at. We actually, that's the metrics that I try to get my clients towards whenever they're dealing with, which exposure therapy is basically the principle. We want to check to see, are you feeling anxiety? And when they say yes, we say good. Okay, great. Because if you're not feeling any anxiety, it means you're not challenging yourself at all. And so we want to have a little bit of anxiety. We don't want to have overwhelming anxiety. We're not talking about panic attacks, right? But if we are feeling panic, what we want to do is, if we can, sit at that same level of agitation, right? The same circumstance, practice our coping skills. Don't walk away from the situation unless you absolutely have to. But if you can stay in that situation, embrace it, feel it, and watch as the anxiety will lower. So we think in that moment when we're experiencing a lot of anxiety over something that we have to change the circumstances to reduce the anxiety. And what that does is actually reinforces the anxiety, and it makes that anxiety stronger long term. So what we actually want to do is the opposite. We want to feel the anxiety, let it come, let it rise, let it decrease, and breathe. We all wear masks not to defy our reflection, but to amend our refraction. Yeah, and it's like the personas that we take on in the different roles. And we can have often interesting conversations about our personas and what they indicate about ourselves, and where the limits are, so we know where our persona begins and where our true self ends, or something. They're not the same, our persona and our true self. How can I tell my husband how extremely attractive he is, both inside and out, in a way that he will be receiving of it and truly believe it? Okay, so dude, I'm right here. So yeah, one thing that I would say about compliments in general, we do want to pay attention if they're heard. And if we're saying it in a way that isn't at all heard, then we might have to adjust the way that we're saying it. But what some people do is they stop saying a compliment just because, see here you said received and believed, and those are two separate things, and there might be a gap of years in between it. I mean, My mom is one of the most wonderful, beautiful, amazing women that God ever created. And she's been told that by her husband for now 50 years. I'm not saying he's always, always treated her like a queen and angel or whatever, but he's told her I love you. He told her how beautiful she is for 50 years. I've told her it for a little less time, but not quite 50 years. I'm younger than that. But in all of that, she still has a hard time believing it. She has gotten way better at receiving it. So why is she not believe that she's amazing? I think there's a few reasons, probably stuff from childhood, probably stuff of limiting beliefs. I know that going back to the thing about our values is, if our primary value is humility, it's impossible to believe that we are beautiful. And that's another reason why I think humility is a great secondary value, but not a great primary value. I grew up in a culture that stressed humility so much. And don't get me wrong, I think that humility is a value. There is a good way. We should stay humble. But when we focus it as the primary goal in our view of ourselves, it's really hard to ever believe that we are attractive inside and out. So one of the things I would say is just keep saying it, right? And we don't want to, it's like the whole making someone happy thing. You can inspire someone to be happier, but if your goal is to make them happy, then it's actually manipulation and it's not healthy. And what you'll often find if somebody is sad and you are trying to cheer them up a little bit, right? Inspire a little bit of happiness, it works. But if you're trying to make them happy, in other words, make them not be sad, then you actually will have them often fight against you. And you see this happen again and again in relationships where somebody's sad and the other person's doing all these things to try to make them happy, to force them into happiness, and the person reacts from it, and then the other person goes, you don't even want to be happy, and then they start fighting, and it's like made the whole dynamic worse. It's like, yeah, you went too far. It's fine to cheer someone up a little bit. It's fine to compliment. It's good to compliment. It's good to affirm. It's good to encourage, but our goal should not be to change their mindset. Our goal should be good, being a good partner and a good steward. So ultimately, it is your husband's responsibility to believe whether or not you're attracted to him. And I think he's probably hearing it. He's probably receiving it more than you recognize. Just don't focus on the ends, focus on living your values, right? Does that make sense? I would do anything for love, but I won't do that. And the 2 out of 3 ain't that bad. Okay? Well, somebody's been listening to Meatloaf. I would do anything for love. I'd run right up to hell and back, down. And I would do anything for love, but I won't do that. And then 2 out of 3 ain't bad. I think that's a different song. Is that a different song? Yeah, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. I think it's a different song. I can't remember that one offhand. I had a funny thing happen back when we listened to CDs in cars. Remember those days? Where I ended up pulling up to a truck driver that was listening to the same Meatloaf CD, and we'd like synced it up, so we were listening to the same thing and jamming to Meatloaf. What a weird incident. Meatloaf is such a weird guy and weird artist, but I do love his songs. I do enjoy the melodrama. Something about these super melodramatic songs and just getting into them and like embracing them with a little awareness of the fact that they're cheesy and melodramatic, but totally embracing the emotion of the experience is really fun. So if loving and lifting up others is my primary goal, then it's more loving to receive your affirmation instead of being overly humble. Yeah. So, I mean, when we're talking about the receiver, right? There is absolutely, so it's like there's the giver and how they should look at it, and then there's the receiver. When it comes to the receiver, we want to absolutely receive a gift. So if you look at it as a physical gift, and affirmations are the same, right? But if you give me a cup and all of a sudden I smash that cup on the ground and I go, "That's a stupid cup," you're going to be like, "Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. I'm never going to give you a cup again," right? Like, gosh, I put a lot of thought into that cup. It's not a great way to receive a gift. And if somebody did that to you, you'd probably stop giving them cups. And you might not give them anything anymore because they're not great at receiving those gifts. That's what you're doing when you say to someone, "You look beautiful today." "No, I don't. I look hideous. I'm fat and I'm disgusting and nobody loves me." Blah, 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 right? It's just, I put a lot of thought into that compliment and you just smashed it on the ground. It's terrible. It's a stupid cup. It's a stupid compliment, right? It's like, "Oh, okay, sorry." Like, and when it comes to the giver, I would say, don't stop giving that love. Don't stop giving those affirmations. You might have to tweak it, right? You might be like, "Okay, I would need to be able to love you," right? And so I'm wanting consent here. I want to do it in a way that honors you and respects your agency in this. If you really want to just believe that you're fat, ugly, and disgusting, like, I don't see you that way. But how do I do this in a way? And this is where questions can help, right? If you really hate cups, I won't keep buying you cups, right? But I want to give you gifts because I love you. And that's the way that this is also the 5 love languages, which is probably overstressed as if it's like the legit, objective. It's a fine filter, but it's not the absolute gospel of how to love people. I think people focus on one direction or the other when it's really both. When it comes to giving and receiving, yes, you should love people in their natural love language when you can, but you also should receive love even if in a way that's not your natural language. Somebody gave me a gift today, and I haven't actually looked at the gift yet, to be honest. But I will, and I'm probably going to enjoy it. The gift they gave me, I really enjoyed. But it was like immediately when I received that, even though gifts is not high on my thing, I received it as the love that it was intended to be. So one of the things that I would say as the receiver is that think about when somebody is offering you a compliment, rather than whether it's true or not in your opinion, right? How do I want, this is a relational gift, right? So it's about you and the person. It's not about objective reality and the authority of what is true, right? We're not starting a debate here, right? If I go, "You are beautiful and I love you," right? This is relational. This is connection. And don't get me wrong, I have done this myself, right? Somebody was like, "Oh man, you look great." And I was like, "Are you kidding me? I'm 5 pounds heavier than I'm supposed to be," right? It's like ridiculous, right? But instead going, "Okay, here's a relational connection opportunity and I want to honor that. How do I do that in a way that is also supporting them and our connection together?" Because that's what matters most. What do you think of the idea of wholesome recovery to take some photos of your husband and show how attractive he is? Ineffective. So yeah, so basically the idea is, trying to have the person see that person through your eyes and thinking that a photograph might help. It might. Sometimes it can. It could backfire. With everything, like, we see ourselves through a filter that we tend to, most people at least, spotlight all the things about ourselves that we think are inadequate. So, this is the whole, like, everybody sees my pimple effect, but reality is probably most people don't notice. Actually, I'll tell you a funny story about my mom, who may or may not be in the chat. So there was a friend of mine who would go to our family brunch like all the time. He was practically like a member of the family. And he had a really long beard and he had super long hair, like as long as mine. And I can't really tell if you don't know, but it's like I got long hair. Okay. So he had long hair and a beard. And we'd make jokes about it all the time. We'd have him play Jesus because he had long hair and a beard. And he decided to, as a joke, because he's a guy who loves to do social experiments, comedy stuff, and just troll the world. He's kind of like Norm Macdonald that way, or my friend Joe. And anyway, this friend of mine decided that halfway through one of his college classes, he was going to go, I think it was college, he was going to go to the bathroom, shave his head and his beard, and then come back as if nothing happened, which he did. And nobody recognized him. They were all, of course, thinking like, I think you're in the wrong classroom. And we're like, he's sharing the story and about how it went at brunch. Now, in fairness to my mom, she was somewhat distracted at probably because she's like taking care of things and hosting and, serving and all this other stuff. But she had seen him. She's looking at, he's right there, right? She'd known him for a very long time. And then she goes, wait, what are you guys talking about? And I can't remember exactly how she said it, but it was something like, she goes, oh, you did do something different with your hair, didn't you? And like, we thought she was joking at first, but she literally hadn't noticed. He had hair down to here and a big thick beard, and then all of a sudden was cleanly shaven and had short hair now. And she literally didn't notice, because whatever she looks at when it comes to the person, maybe she looks at his eyes or something like that. She's not somebody who's really paying attention to the hair. I had somebody who's a friend of mine going on a date recently, and they were like over stressing about what they're going to wear. And I'm like, look, some guys really notice. Most guys will have no memory of what you wore or didn't wear that day, right? It's like we think everybody is paying attention to these details of us. And the reality is they're dealing with their own level. It's the same thing with social interactions. We think that everyone notices when we're socially awkward. But the reality is they're probably, maybe, I'm going to say probably, a lot of them are dealing with their own social anxieties. Or if they're not dealing with their own social anxieties, are going through some other struggle or worrying about some other thing, and their focus is very different. So they're not thinking, how socially awkward is this person? What is this person thinking? How are they doing all these things? Yeah, so all that to say, with the photo thing, it could work. You could highlight all the things that you think are beautiful in that photo. If you have the ability to draw, you could draw the person, as you see them, but it might backfire and they might focus on the things that they don't love about themselves. Often, I do feel like nobody survives middle school entirely without some kind of emotional trauma. I think at this point, I don't see it when I look in the mirror, Dumbo ears anymore. But for many years, I absolutely did, because when I was a kid, I think my ears and my nose grew first. And so I think as a kid, I probably did have a pretty big nose and a pretty big ear. Either way, I was called Dumbo a lot. And I saw myself as somebody who had crazy long ears, or crazy big ears and a big nose. And it was like a huge thing for me in how I viewed myself negatively, physically. And it took a lot of people telling me like, no, your face is pretty proportionate. And actually there was a youth kid that I actually celebrated her wedding years after she was a youth kid, that there was this joke that we kept going back of how she had perfectly proportionate ears and I had perfectly, like, she'd be like, oh, wow, I noticed your perfectly proportionate ears today. And I'm like, thank you. I noticed your perfectly proportionate ears, because she was made fun of for having ears that were too small. and me, ears that are too big. And so we both discovered that we had the same kind of middle school trauma. Because what I focus on gets bigger. Yeah, absolutely. So, the body dysmorphia filter of how we view ourselves can be a reaction from a middle school trauma, or something that we made fun of, or an ideal that we thought that we should reach. And what's interesting is often the unique features of our face are something that the person ends up really falling in love with. And so, we see freckles and we go, oh my gosh, how cute that person with the freckles is. And they still think, oh, these stupid, ugly freckles, I wish I didn't have them. It's like, and they look at somebody with a dimple and we think, oh, that's so cute, I wish I had that dimple. And then there's like, oh, that ugly dimple, I wish I could get rid of. It's like, it's so silly how we are as human beings. Ultimately, when it comes to physical appearance, because that's when we're talking about attract. You said both inside and out earlier in the question. But when it comes to physical appearance, there really is only two factors. One is connection, right? So we want to be able to make connection with somebody. Somebody's got to, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, as one of my friends said recently, right? Thank God we do find different things attractive. So different people will find different things attractive. And you might have a look that is attractive to more of the population or less, right? Then the other part is just in terms of the physical, right? It's healthy, right? Do you have a healthy functioning body, right? Inside and out, physically. If it's all healthy and good, this is great. This is great news, right? Be grateful. Honestly, for some perspective here, if all of a sudden you were in a situation where even the parts of your body that you don't like, you couldn't use because they got broken or messed up, you'd wish to be able to go back to where you had it in just a physical form that you didn't love, right? My nose, as an example, it does work fairly well, not terribly, but it's been broken multiple times. And if all of a sudden I might hate my nose, but if all of a sudden my nose got completely smashed and I couldn't breathe out of it at all, I'd be like, oh man, I wish I could go back to that, broken, messed up, semi-functioning nose instead of that completely smashed and I can't breathe out of nose, right? If I might not like the fact that my legs aren't strong enough or whatever, if I couldn't use them, I sure would wish to have these legs back. Okay. Why is our brain so stubborn of letting go old patterns of self-perception? So one of the things that we get stuck in is when we start to make those ideas of self-perception as identity. So even in my sermon this morning, I was talking about the difference of consistency and congruity, and that concept of truth, right? Trustworthy, internally reliable, and the idea of it's objectively accurate, right? That's how most of us talk about truth. It's objectively real. This is the truth, right? And I can't tell you how many people will get stuck in arguments, even with themselves, over whether or not something is objective reality. And I'm not trying to say that we should go, that doesn't matter at all, but that should be less of a focal point. So and this is, by the way, true in ACT. So in ACT, one of the things, hey, Ripley, yeah, I'm glad you're back now that it's not storming as much. Yeah. In ACT, we try to tell someone, instead of focusing on a thought and whether it's true or not, does it move you towards or away from your values? So if your self-perception is your focus point, right, you're going to debate yourself on whether something is true or not, and then you're going to get stuck in that thing, right? You look in the mirror, you see it, right? but we get it backwards. It's not that you only believe what you see, but you only see what you believe. And so if you tell yourself, if I literally to this day, if I told myself I got big ears, I got big ears, I got big ears, I got big ears, guess what? Eventually I'm going to see in the mirror these huge ears and be convinced that I have big ears. So I would say that part of why our brain is so stubborn at letting go of those old patterns is because we've made them part of our identity and we've convinced ourselves that they're real. And if we would, one of the biggest keys, paradoxically, maybe unexpectedly, to mental health is just acknowledging that we don't experience reality. And then asking ourselves what draws us towards our values rather than away from it. Is it believing that you are hideous and everyone thinks you're ugly, drawing you towards a life that you're engaged in relationships in a way that matter? I doubt it. Like, if you're a narcissist, maybe if you're like trying to balance your way away from arrogance, then it can be helpful. Humbling yourself a little bit. I still think it's probably not the smartest tool. There probably is a healthier tool that's more balanced that you can use than telling yourself that you're ugly to balance yourself from being egotistical. You'll probably end up with a very divided self that is going to cause you a lot of mental health problems, right? Is seeing yourself as the most beautiful creature that ever lived drawing you towards relationships in a way that matter? At least there. Probably not that either, right? So what would be a posture that is going to draw you towards relationships in a healthy manner? That is a better focus point than whether you think objectively it's true or not. The biggest obstacle in knowing myself better is the blissful ignorance of not knowing any better. As I emulate the roles and personas I believe I'm supposed to be. And so this goes into that persona conversation that, some of you have heard me say this before. Roles, personas, the way we present ourselves and the way we envision ourselves, that are like different outfits. You might look really good in that outfit. It might fit you really well. And it doesn't mean don't wear that outfit. It just means you got to take it off, and every once in a while you got to wash it. And hopefully, and look, I'm not trying to say that we should all become a nudist colony and walk around. I think we'll have lots of problems doing that. But there should be some times that you're naked. Right? You got to have some times that you can be emotionally vulnerable with certain individuals, or at least before God, where you don't take on that persona. It's hopefully at least to yourself. I mean, like, I don't know if you guys have seen Arrested Development with the Never Nudes. It's a comedy show, but there's a guy who like literally keeps jean shorts on even in the shower. It's like, that cannot be good hygiene. At a certain point, you got to see yourself beyond the idea of your persona, right? You got to see yourself beyond the idea of the roles that you take. And this is going to another ACT principle of the self as content, where we identify ourselves based on the content of our lives and the different roles that we have, and self as context. Self as context is that we see we can be these things in these contexts, and we can be these very different things in these other contexts. And so this is a version of ourself that is still seeing the tendencies and the patterns, but they're not having it be, as the person said earlier, stubbornly part of their self-perception, right? So why are our brains so stubborn about letting go of old patterns of self-perception? Because we made it part of our identity of how we see ourselves. But if we instead go, I have, so here's one that I say, right? This is a diffuse statement, and we don't have that much time to go through all of the principles of diffusion we've talked about in other sessions, but like, Diffusion is basically pulling the thought and the feeling away from our identity so we can better play with it. So if I go, I have had the tendency in the past of being a people pleaser, and I can, in certain circumstances, fall into people pleasing, which is a very true statement about myself. That's a self-contextual statement, right? I can even get more specific of what circumstances have me fall into the people-pleasing tendencies, because there are certain circumstances that I'm more likely to fall into people-pleasing tendencies. But me saying that statement about myself gives me the opportunity to grow. It makes it so it's easier for me to not still be a people pleaser, versus if I say I am a people pleaser, I am creating an identity based around people pleasing. So it shouldn't be surprising to me when it's really hard for me to not people please, because I've literally told myself to see myself as a people pleaser. And your conscious is not controlling all the mechanics of your mind, but it is the one in charge. So when you give the order and you say, I'm a piece of crap, right? Your conscious is giving the command to the rest of your mind, act in a way that is aligned with that statement. So you are literally asking yourself to be a piece of crap by calling yourself that, right? It doesn't mean you go, I'm the greatest ever, right? So don't hear that. We want a contextual statement, right? I can act crappy, right, in these circumstances, and I can act really noble and loving in these circumstances. Now gives myself psychological flexibility. A few chats ago, it was said that fear is an effective way to quit something short term. Maybe not ideal, but it tends to work. What's the most effective way to quit something long term? Yeah, so long term, one is slow, okay, progressive, processing through the feelings of fear, right, rather than driven towards them, but ultimately by focusing on the bigger value, the primary value, the thing you most want to achieve, right? So like they do this in motivational interviewing, which is a therapy technique. They look for, as Nietzsche talks about, like you can go through any what with the right why. If you're looking at the thing that is the positive motivation, the big deep desire that you have, and working towards remembering that, then you can take steps towards effective way of change, right? So instead of looking at, if I don't do this, this terrible thing might happen, this is what I want my life to eventually look like. And if I do the right steps, I can set myself up for success to move towards my values and live a life of meaning and purpose, right? So there's no way around it. Connecting with people is always going to create vulnerability, but it brings me to a life that matters and I can be more engaged. This is the way we want to reframe and process through and verbalize as we grow. Okay, so that's about it. We're about at time. We can tune in next time. Same bad time, same bad channel. Thank you, everyone, for contributing in the chat. If you want to understand the difficulty of coding something long-term, try to write with your other hand. Oh, quitting. Okay, I was going to say I'm confused. If you wanted to try to understand well, and actually, so I had a guitar teacher that would talk about every once in a while switching hands just to realize how much you've grown in your guitar playing, because at a certain point it can be disheartening, feeling like you're not really progressing that much, and then you switch hands, you go, oh, actually I've grown quite a bit, more than I give myself credit for. But anyway, same bad time, same bad channel for our next chat next Sunday, 7 o'clock Eastern time. And remember, you can always text questions at 772-303-3034. All right. So thanks again for being in the chat. I think writing with my left hand would be easier. Well, then you might be left-handed. All right. Love you guys. Have a good night.